Hey, hail to the victors valiant. Yeah, you knew I'd have to open with the University of Michigan's Wolverines' defeat of the Washington Huskies. Some call them the Dogs. I mean, seriously, DAWGS? Like you're going to have swagger if you're an Alaskan Malamute? I don't think so. But anyhow, hail to the victors valiant. It was a great game. I stayed up and watched every minute of it. Loved almost every minute of the season because I've been a Michigan Wolverines fan for 55 or so years, and in the last decade or so, there hadn't been couple decades, there hadn't been a lot to cheer about. But I'm all smiles today. Congratulations to the Wolverines. Congratulations to Blake Corum, and to Jim Harbaugh and to JJ McCarthy. Thank you for a great year. So I get a little
Look at us.
pumped up
So I
about
just
the
have a
A's.
quick tech update here because everybody loves to pretend like we're not on the ball. But we finally got a static stream key from Rumble. Martin.
Oh, how did that
And
happen? Who did
I
we
have no
bribe?
idea. They're saying it's in beta, so I don't know if they're insulting us or if it's just a beta version. Either way, it seems to have worked. So we're live on Rumble right now, and I no longer have to duplicate efforts every morning in the frenetic pursuit of getting this thing live on multiple platforms. So go Rumble. Thank you for calling me beta, but giving me a static stream key.
Yeah, well, at least they didn't call you Beto O'Rourke. You don't need to get your teeth done or your attitude readjusted or your manhood checked at some clinic that checks these sorts of things, if there are such clinics any longer. So, I had an interesting disagreement with my wife the other day, and you're thinking, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe you should take that to a marital counselor." No, it involved the film Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie or read David Grann's book. It was done in 2017. I recommend the book. It's one of the earliest successes of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Osage Indians in the territory of Oklahoma, um, their territorial land, sat on some valuable oil wells, and the result was members of the tribe became fabulously wealthy. In Oklahoma Territory, in one community, they began, however, to die mysteriously after acquiring that wealth. And the tribe sent an emissary to Washington to ask somebody to come and take a look at things. The then Bureau of Investigation sent a young agent, and lo and behold, the tribe members were being killed. Sometimes murdered, sometimes blown up in murders for hire, sometimes poisoned and dying lingering deaths, all organized by William Hale, an individual who thought that, if you could marry into these families, and position yourself just right, you could inherit that wealth as though you were an Indian. And so the Killers of the Flower Moon is the story of that investigation and that plot to deprive the Indians of their oil wealth. Martin Scorsese just released the new film. It stars Leonard DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. De Niro plays Hale. Leonard DiCaprio plays his nephew, Ernest Burkhart. And it's a long movie. I mean, it's a funny tell here. My wife and I get it on whatever Amazon Prime or whatnot, and we see movie 209, and we think, oh, okay, 2 hours and 9 minutes, and we're watching the thing, and it's going on and on, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, is this the Tolstoy's? Is this Leo Tolstoy's version of this? Because I'm starting to feel like we're in War and Peace, a novel that never ends. 209 minutes, 309 minutes. Okay, 3 hours, 9 minutes, or whatever it is. So it was a long movie, 3.5 hours. But here's the point. In the end, DiCaprio's character, Burkhart, decides to become a government witness. And he tells the story of how Hale had orchestrated all of these deaths. And you learn at the end of the movie that notwithstanding this, DiCaprio was sentenced to life in prison. And I say to my wife, well, then why did he plead? I mean, why did he cooperate with the government if he got nothing? And my wife, ever patient, who shall go unnamed here so that she can have her privacy, had one of those temporary and recurrent and ever present moments of despair that she always has with me. Do I have to teach you everything about what makes life worth living? And basically said, well, the confession had value in and of itself. It showed his complexity and his attempt, to show his wife that who was an Indian, and he unwittingly or wittingly participated in an effort to poison her. She was saved in the end. How he was trying to come to reconcile himself with what he he had done. And I thought, fine. But, with respect to plea bargaining, I often have prosecutors come to me and say, we can work with your client. Confession is good for the soul. And I look at these prosecutors and I say, what the hell's the matter with you? You're not a priest. This isn't a confession booth. The state isn't involved in the administration of sacraments. You want to lock my client up forever? Go fuck yourself. If you want, there is no point in pleading or cooperating with the state unless you get something in exchange. Whatever difficulties DiCaprio's character, Burkhart, had because of his conduct, however distraught he was about the role he'd played in destroying other lives, confessing to the state, giving the state what it wants, evidence against Hale, against Robert De Niro, is an instrumental value that serves the purposes of the state here on Earth. It doesn't have anything to do with reformation of character. And so, I try to explain to my wife that in the business of criminal defense, what a lawyer does is represent his client's interests, his liberty interests, with respect to the state. And the state doesn't have the power to grant absolution. The state doesn't have the power to forgive. The state doesn't have the power to grant redemption. The state either locks you up or it doesn't. And if you're going to give something to the state, you should get something in exchange. So I take a look at Killers of the Flower Moon. It's a great book. The book is better than the movie. Scorsese bit off more than could easily be chewed in the film, and he could have cut an hour from the film and told the same story, perhaps as powerfully. But the book is a wonderful read. It tells the story of a group of men, basically, who preyed on an Indian tribe, and for the most venal of reasons, sought to kill members one after another in order to acquire their oil wealth. And obviously that's wrong. That's not conduct that society wants to approve of. But the portrayal of Ernest Burkhart that DiCaprio gave, while good as a piece of acting, was altogether unconvincing as a tactical matter, at least in the business of criminal defense. Indeed, in the movie, you never see that Burkhart has a lawyer. He's meeting with federal agents. He runs into De Niro in a prison. He's on the witness stand, and all this time he's unrepresented. I suspect dramatic liberties were taken there to make this into a claim about moral redemption, about the power of confession. But that moral lesson was at least lost on one criminal defense lawyer, aka moi, because there is no moral point to plea bargaining. And criminal defense lawyers and defendants should never be tricked into thinking that they're making the world a better place by cooperating with the state. If you're going to cooperate with the state, if you're going to offer state's witnesses, get some protection for yourself in the end, because there's no point in signing up for a life sentence if you don't have to. The state's here, to keep order, and it cares about order in the here and now. It doesn't care about your soul. And so it was a disappointing film. I in that regard, I was outraged by it as a criminal defense lawyer and thought that the government,
outraged.
I'm in the business of trucking, bartering, and trading in human suffering. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not negotiating on behalf of a client. Yesterday I had a client who had been charged with first-degree rape years ago, walk out the door. The state dropped the sex charges, and he pled to serving alcohol to a minor and reckless endangerment in exchange for probation. Not once did I think about what was good for his soul. My job was to hold the state to its burden of proof, point out weaknesses in its case, and demand his right to a trial, and extract such concessions as I could get on his behalf. In the end, the client was thankful for the work, and he's not in prison. A different lawyer might have pled him to prison time. He could have gone to trial and won, maybe. If he lost, he would have pulled 10, 12 years. And that is what goes on in the criminal courts. It's not about morals. It's not about reformation of character. No matter what.
BTL says we need to get lawyers reviewing lawyers in movie and TV. I kind of like that as a project for us, Norm. That might be fun.
Yeah.
We can start.
It'll make my head explode. I mean, it's no fun to be a criminal defense lawyer and then to watch TV or television portrayals of movies because of trials, because what the scriptwriter has to do is try to make it entertaining and try to move it along. What a lawyer's job is to, I once said to a lawyer, with a good friend of mine, we were talking about this the other day. He and I were chuckling. We're getting ready to tee up a murder case in September, and we're preparing the moves and whatnot that need to be done. And he said, one of the things I've always appreciated about you, Norm, is you're honest. And I said, well, I'm old and I don't have the energy for deceit any longer. He said, when I first met you, you remember what you told me? I said, no, this was in another homicide case. He said, I'm here to mess up your case any way I can. And that is my job as a defense lawyer. And so, like, when it comes to the laying of an evidentiary foundation, that's like watching ice melt. You want to authenticate a document. You want to show that that this piece of hearsay satisfies one of the many exceptions to the hearsay rule. You want to throw the jury out of the room to argue an evidentiary foundation. You want to argue that it's more prejudicial than probative. Putting all that in front of a television audience is going to kill people. I mean, we wouldn't need Sominex or sleep aids anymore. But so I think lawyers critiquing the portrayal of lawyers on television.
All about the audience, Norm. Think about being a 1L or a 2L, and you're doing your doctrinal coursework, and you have some lawyers reviewing lawyers in a movie, pointing out the holes in the procedural timeline for the criminal process, right? That would be really interesting as a study aid, I think. Because everybody has to give the class their favorite law movie when you go into 1L year. I'm just giving you my experience.
Oh, there you go.
But there isn't a whole lot of support for, what makes the movie great or not. But, there's a lot of My Cousin Vinny's. There's a lot of, A Few Good Men, those sorts of references. But it would be interesting, I think, and not that we need any more work between.
No, but it would be fun. I mean, I'm warming to the idea.
Yeah, it may be that our intended audience is for those who actually are looking to learn about the law, and if Hollywood is going to do the job of whittling a script down to something that can be fit into 90 to 120 minutes, stay entertaining, and keep people engaged, well, then our job has already been done on that front. We just should take that and package it in a way that gives people who actually want to learn about specific parts of that process something to look at.
Great idea, BTL. I think you've created a monster. What's going on?
Hold on. Mari says the movie A Civil Action was great. We studied it in civil procedure.
Here's a funny story about civil action, Maury. I've been practicing law for more than 30 years, and I've had one sick day in my career. I used to, when my kids were younger, and the bugs floated around the house, we had a rule that if my temperature was less than 101.5, I wasn't sick. I'd go to court because there was always something around the house, and I wasn't going to stay home.
Mask up.
So one day I had the 102 or whatnot. And I said to my wife, I'm staying home today. And she said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. What do you do when you're sick? So she ran out to the bookstore and got me a copy of Jonathan Harr's Civil Action and brought it home to me before she left for her job. She's self-employed and started late in the day. So I picked up that Harr book on the civil action. I couldn't put it down until I was done. I read it in one sitting. I mean, it's a long book and it was a long day. But the point is, I wasn't sick at all. If I was well enough to read that book. So Jonathan Harr's Civil Action is one of the best books I've ever read about a civil case. It talks about the burdens of discovery in the context of uncovering a toxic tort, about the bankrupting burden of civil procedure on lawyers, and about the gutty sense of tenacity it takes to see a case through to its conclusion against, I think it was Union Carbide, I'm not sure if I'm recalling it correctly, but what it's like to take on a massive corporation for the right reasons and be bankrupted by it, all in the name of justice. That it's a gritty film. Thank you, Maury, for reminding me of this story.
Well, you want to just call an audible here? I think you and I were listening before the stream started this morning, and would like to give a shout out to Artisan Well, who follows all of our work. And I think, Norm, you may know Artisan Well in real life.
Artisan is a wonderful paralegal, and she's done me the solid of editing work of mine from time to time when I'm overwhelmed by my responsibilities. So Artisan, thanks for pointing out this clip. Mike, what are we looking at?
So we've got the appearance from Elise Stefanik on Meet the Press that we referenced yesterday by proxy when the storylines were coming out in the written press about Elise Stefanik saying that she wouldn't certify the 2024 election. After that was over, I think during the stream I said, we haven't looked into it at all, so it's tough to render an opinion on something. And I believe we came down along the lines of saying in the abstract that you won't certify an election as an elected member of Congress isn't necessarily a great look. But I think I also gave the important caveat, that without knowing exactly what was said in the context of that conversation, it's tough to take the mainstream press at its word that is indeed what Elise says. So I've fast forwarded here to the beginning of that segment where Elise is asked directly whether she would certify the election, and I'm going to let it play.
Half, Joe Biden and the Department of Justice have been withheld from going after the Biden crime family, which Joe Biden sits atop of.
Other top Democrats have been indicted as well, but we have a lot to get to, so I want to stay on track. You mentioned Pennsylvania. Would you vote to certify, and will you vote to certify the results of the 2024 election, no matter what they show?
Well, I voted not to certify the state of Pennsylvania because, as we saw in Pennsylvania and other states across the country, that there was unconstitutional acts circumventing the state legislature and unilaterally changing election law.
What about 2024? What about 2024?
We will see if this is a legal and valid election. What we're seeing so far is that Democrats are so desperate, they're trying to remove President Trump from the ballot. That is a suppression of the American people. And the Supreme Court is taking that case up in February. That should be a 9-0 to allow President Trump to appear on the ballot, because that's the American people's decision to make this November.
And the matter is, of course, halted pending that appeal, as you say. But just to be very clear, I don't hear you committed to certifying the election results. Will you only commit to certify the results if former President Trump wins? Does that mean former President Trump wins?
No, it means if they are constitutional. What we saw in 2020 was unconstitutional circumventing of the Constitution, not going through state legislatures when it comes to changing election law. And we're seeing this in my home state of New York, Kristen. We are seeing Democrats try to steal the election and illegally gerrymander congressional districts that we fairly won and are fair line. So I see this at a very local level, as well as the unconstitutional overreach we saw at the national level in 2020.
So I don't want to bore everybody to tears, but I think that that's a really important soundbite in approaching the topic du jour with respect to certification of elections, specifically with Elise being in the news really potently for her takedown of the Ivy League.
Yeah, but maybe not. I mean, Elise, this is Elise Stefanik, we should note, is not a lawyer, and the Constitution is not is not a talisman. You can't just say something's unconstitutional and stop the discussion. You've got to show that it's unconstitutional, and you've got to be able to frame the issue in legal terms that a court can accept and construct. Stefanik claiming that these results were unconstitutional because they circumvented state legislatures' ability to set the rules and terms for how to count votes refers, I think, in part to manipulation of ballots and the requirements for submitting them and counting them incident to COVID. And there was a tremendous set of controversies in the country in 2020 incident to COVID and the use of emergency powers to cope and to cope with it. But where I just find Stefanik dangerously wrong is she's doing what every jackass on a bar stool has the constitutional right to do every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night. Every night the bar is open. Pull out their copy of the Constitution from their pocket and say, this is what the Constitution says. And unless you agree with my interpretation of the Constitution, it's unconstitutional. She's just not persuasive. The fact of the matter is there were 60 plus actions brought into court to challenge by way of legal process the constitutionality or of the manner in which votes were gathered, taken, and counted. And each and every one of them failed for legal reasons. I don't hear Stefanik talking about that. And so I find her rhetoric to be, Mike, I realize this is not the point Artisan Well was making, and that Artisan Well sent this because she, quote unquote, respectfully disagreed with me. Her head's probably exploding now thinking that I've drank the Kool-Aid. Well, the Kool-Aid is the rule of law. and settled procedures and ways of reading things. You know, we're going to soon begin a project on law and legitimacy where we work through a constitutional law textbook. And the objective is to show people what it is to interpret the Constitution as a lawyer, how lawyers do it. Now, you may say, screw the lawyers. You know, I'm with Shakespeare. First thing, let's kill all the lawyers. I get that. You can do that. And you can then say the Constitution means whatever I think it means because I can read. You can do that, but that's just not the republic we live in. And lawyers are barred. That is, there's a bar exam. They are licensed to practice law because they are minimally qualified to manipulate legal doctrine on behalf of clients in their interest. Stefanik has been voted to Congress. She's a non-lawyer. She's out there throwing the C word around, and I'm talking about Constitution as though it's self-enforcing. She's every bit as dangerous, in my view, as that view of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, that says every state official can interpret what insurrection means in their own way and reach their own conclusions for their own reasons.
Well,
That
and so don't look any further than
division.
that, Norm. Well, don't look any further than that, Norm. So I think that there's high ground to be had in recognizing exactly your latter point there about the bastardization of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and finding a conservative base within the political sphere that will make the political left just as uncomfortable and unnerved by methodology as the political right has become with, say, I don't know, mass mail-in voting, etc., during the 2020 election. Because in this same interview, the anchor, whomever, I can't remember her name right now. Anyway, she keeps repeating this thing about 2020 was the most secure election in history. We know this, we know that, we know this, we know that, we know that Biden doesn't have any influence over the DOJ's prosecution of Trump. We know this, we know this, we know this. We don't know any of that. The point of her appearing on this, I believe, was mostly rhetorical battle lines being drawn to make the political left uncomfortable about the fact that there is a huge majority of people in this country that are deeply uncomfortable with the way the election was administered, the way votes were handled, counted, and the way election night went in January of 2020 or in November of 2019.
And
right?
where did all those claims end up as a result?
We've talked about this before. We can circle the drain doing this. It's just, again, high level, high altitude on the issue. I think that there's a lot of people who are breathing a sigh of relief knowing that there aren't a bunch of cowards on the political right that have been elected there.
I hear you, I support Stefanik's right to speak and to speak out, but I think what she's talking about is a broader crisis of legitimacy. And I think the claims about election irregularities and being dissatisfaction are really just claims about dissatisfaction with the results of the election.
Of course. That's always been the
case.
case.
Her direct appeal to constitutionalism is sort of like the guy, standing on the town green with a Bible saying, God told me the world's going to end tonight at 5 o'clock. I mean, there's traditions. There's a universe of rational discourse. There's a place where reasonable minds meet. And with respect to the law and the Constitution, that place is in a courtroom where cases get litigated according to constitutional doctrine, precedent, stare decisis. Stefanik can bring her cases into a courtroom, and she can have a trial. It can be as fully and fairly litigated as she wants it to be. But to sit on national television as a member of Congress and say X, Y, and Z is unconstitutional without offering an analysis of the Constitution, without talking about a clause that was violated, without talking about how this occurred, without acknowledging that every single court case to make that claim failed as a matter of law is irresponsible, in my view. It's
so devil's advocate, Norm, should she have answered that question directly by saying unequivocally, I will certify the results of the 2024 election?
No, I think the whole interview was a pox on both of them, a pox on the Meet the Press interlocutor.
Meet the Press, because the Meet the Press is as dirty as it gets already anyway. They have nothing to lose by baiting that sort of trap.
What I say by that is, this is why I don't watch those shows. I mean, that was a meaningless discussion. Will you certify 2024 no matter what happens? No. Will you certify it if you disagree with the results of the election? Maybe. Will you certify it if you agree with the results of the election? Maybe. That's like asking an umpire when in the World Series, if you're behind the plate and it's a 3-2 count, and the pitcher winds up and throws. Are you going to call a strike or a ball? Well, let's see what crosses the plate. So I think that I take your point, Mike, about the interview being used to draw lines and bait people. I think Stefanik should have just stepped back and said, look, and she should have done what Vivek Ramaswamy's been doing. We need to talk sensibly about electoral reform and about paper ballots, about voter IDs, about counting votes the day they're made, maybe having a national holiday the day of the election so that everybody can turn up at the polling places. And we need to do what other democratic countries that vote do, and that is count the vote one day and not have it be an extended process where the rules for how to count ballots may or may not change after the election, because that does raise questions in people's minds about whether the rules are being manipulated for those currently in power or those controlling the levels of power within a given set of institutions or norms. I think that's an important discussion. I think Stefanik failed to reframe the issue in an intelligent way, and I think Meet the Press failed to ask intelligent questions.
That's right. And of course, some in the chat, it's me again, says, yet the left does what Stefanik does every day. And I think that was my point at the beginning, is just addressing that uh, why withhold a weapon that can be wielded against the enemy when the enemy is content to wield that weapon? And for as long as I've been alive, the conservative side of politics has remained sort of the principled, upright, sort of, we don't indulge, blah, 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 and sort of dignified, except for the fact that results are all that ultimately matters, right? And if you consistently lose, but upholding these sort of dignities of, not stooping to the level, what we know is that the political left knows how to win. They've been doing a lot of that in the last decade and a half, right? Win, 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 win by any means. And to that end, I think you're right, Norm. On that we agree that Vivek is running a clinic on how to handle these on how to handle these issues, how to answer the questions, and how to frame them in a way that promotes the message that you're intending to send, rather than write headlines for mainstream establishment press articles, right? That are already out to cast what you say in a light that is favorable to their readership.
Well, so Artisan Well, I appreciate your bringing this clip to our attention. If you have, I don't know what your relationship, if you have a relationship with Stefanik is, but, ask her to look first and leap later. She's got a national spotlight on her, but what we need is more than hot air. We need some substantive analysis of issues, and she missed an opportunity to do it. So what's up with the revolt of the kids, Mike?
I came across this late last night. It was published on January 4th in the American Mind. So those of you who watch us daily or semi-routinely know that I'm a big fan of much of the work published on the American Mind. And I follow Inez Stepman on X and have for several years now, I believe. This is the first time I'm seeing her articles. And that's not to say that she's not affiliated with the Claremont Institute or hasn't published widely, but this popped up, and obviously the image on the screen caught my attention. Of course, Norm, you and I have been talking a lot about the Israel-Hamas conflict and the domestic implications and consequences, and truthfully, what is being yielded in terms of public discourse around anti-Semitism and the like, based on that foreign conflict. And the revolt of the kids gets at a lot of Inez's position that these sensibilities, these anti-Semitic sensibilities, are not just anti-Semitic sensibilities. Rather, they are anti-white sensibilities, and more specifically, they are oppressor versus oppressed sensibilities. And not only that, they are absolutely here to stay, right? So this article is beautiful because it's a sort of a demographic study, generational study between boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. What the consciousness really is, divided into those subgroups around issues of patriotism, around issues of higher education, the mission thereof, a general view of the United States as being a good place or a great place, etc., and what we are to expect in the coming years and the coming generations as boomers cede their inheritance and their wealth to the forthcoming generation of millennials, which are about 72 million strong. I don't know if you knew that, Norm, but millennials occupy 72 million people out of America's current population and stand to wield quite a bit of wealth and power. And the question is, how will that be wielded, to what ends?
Well, I mean, to suicidal ends, or so it seems. I mean, if everything is all about identity and who's been oppressed in the United States is this font of oppressive, this, that, and everything else, then just crash the country, make it into a third world shithole, and everybody can live unhappily ever after. And that seems to be the message for this new generation. And as I was reading through the piece this morning, I kept thinking of Ayn Rand's piece, Atlas Shrugged. I'm thinking, if this is what these people want, you can have it. I'm checking out. Why would I work to support a vision of the world that reduces everything to the lowest common denominator and blames people who've succeeded and created a universe that everyone wants to live in? I mean, one of the great ironies of modern times is, the West is demonized and the United States is called an oppressive country, and yet where is it that people are flocking to live? They're not flocking to live in Gaza. I don't see people running to go, hey, I got to get to Yemen, or maybe the Ukraine's a good looking place to go. Let's go there. No, it's New York. It's Chicago. It's your hometown. And what they want to do is they want to eat off the table that you and your ancestors built, so they can shit underneath it and say what stinks. And, from my perspective, I'm not having it. And it may be that this younger generation is here to stay with their rhetoric of hatred and their belief that history is a tawdry tale of oppression and it's time to level the playing field and time to behead the oppressors. Here's my head. Come and get it, because I ain't giving it to you. I'm going to keep my wits and fight you, because I think the heritage that we have created is worth saving. Maury raises a great point. It's nihilism. And of course it is. These young people bring nothing, in my opinion, to the table that is appetizing, other than a sense of entitled rage and an elevated sense of self-worth that is not that doesn't correspond with anything they've accomplished, other than managing to be survived, or managing to be born and survive to the point of sentience. But that's not enough to create a society. It's not enough to create a good world. I'm going to have to look through this more carefully, Mike. You spotted it out. You brought it out to me this morning, and I didn't have time to read it carefully. But I'm going to do that.
Yeah, please do. And I'll leave our audience with this paragraph that I'm highlighting under the subheading of ignorance is power. It is writes, quote, "Lest we forget the outrages of a couple of years ago in this fast-moving news environment, the false and America-hating 1619 Project produced teaching materials used in more than 3,500 schools in the country. And the 1619 Project itself was merely the capstone of an attempt already decades in the making to convince successive generations of Americans to hate their country. Out of the largest 100 school districts, home to millions of students, not a single one has the words America or patriotism in its formal mission statement, a revealing statistic indeed."
Ideas have consequences, and if you teach people to hate their home, they won't defend it. And you know what? The luxury that they've had to hate, where they've been brought up, is spending another generation's capital. Long after I'm gone, and Mike, when you're my age, you'll be looking at a world where the prospects are considerably less robust than they are now, unless we fight this cancer at its core. The Pledge of Allegiance isn't a source of shame. The national anthem isn't something to grieve over. The Western civilization isn't an accident. These are all the products of a long-standing tradition, an intellectual tradition, a spiritual tradition that people have fought over generations to perfect. And now one generation wants to throw it away, and we're supposed to say, "Oh, let the kids be kids. It's their world now." Bullshit. It's our world. Come and get it if you think you want to take it.
With that said, I've got on the screen lawpoddaily.com. Go subscribe to the newsletter. First newsletter will be published tomorrow, mañana. So do that. We've got a number of you who have already subscribed to the newsletter laying in wait. Thank you for subscribing. Send the link LawPod Daily to your friends and family. Send it to one person. Brag about us. Say something good.
Send it to Elise Stefanik.
That's true. True story.
And let's get her on the air, because she's got a lot of potential. She just needs a little more education.
Well, she is a focal point for criticism in the years now subsequent to her taking down the deans of our coveted Ivy League institutions.
Are you talking about Hamas University in Cambridge, Massachusetts?
Yeah, exactly right. So I think that she's going to be the target of much more criticism to come. They have to delegitimize her as a person now. So it's not a surprise that we're seeing what we're seeing from that. Anyway, Norm, we're here every day, 8 a.m., Monday through Friday. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 a.m. If you want to listen to us audio only, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, wherever you find premium podcasts. Otherwise, we are live on Rumble, YouTube, and X at LawPod Daily. Norm, have a good day. Stay
Hail
dry.
to the victors valiant. Remember, there's only one national championship in college football, and there's only one national champion. That's the University of Michigan Wolverines. See you all tomorrow. Go
See you
Blue.
tomorrow. Bye, everybody.